My name is Tom Evans. I teach at the Community Learning Center here in Tooele, and I teach forensic science, biotechnology, and the chemical technician course. So when I saw it's Melinda Karp, is that, yeah. When I saw Melinda Karp's video that you guys showed, it had never occurred to me, it reminded me and caused me to reflect at length on my own college experience. And in the context of her research and listening to her talk, it made me realize that that was something that was a serious challenge for me as a freshman and even into my sophomore year of college. That along with learning the material at a higher rate that I was used to, along with all the other challenges with regards to material, the challenges of navigating the college experience were part of what was making it difficult for me. And I'd never considered that before I'd actually watched that video, but I went home and spent a lot of time reflecting on that first couple of years of college and realized that was actually a major part of my overall challenge with the college experience. And as I got a chance to think about my own experiences, it made me realize that had I not had those specific challenges with regards to just navigating college life, I think that the challenges that I would have felt with regards to content and material would have been less. And so it really caused me to sit down and realize that my personal challenges with just the day-to-day navigation of college life made a bigger contribution to the challenges overall that I faced as a college student. And then when I got good at navigating those things, which happened over time, I realized that actually made a real contribution to how much I started to enjoy and appreciate and like college. So I'd never given thought to just how much of an impact those factors played in my own experience. But when I sat down and remembered it, I realized that it was a big deal. And it was something that I think and I think most people do, started to take for granted at the end of maybe the middle to the end of my sophomore year, as I began to be fluent about just all the aspects of college. Then when I became good at navigating those aspects of the college experience, I think I took for granted how much of an impact they had, and I was just focusing then on content. So there's been a few things that I try to do. I do try to share as many of my personal experiences with college and especially my undergraduate and graduate work. And I have a doctorate in theoretical chemistry, so I always like to remind my students that I was in college for a long time. So I got really good at some of these issues, and it helped me. I think it helps me as I share experiences with my students, especially ones that are unfamiliar with them up to this point in their life because they've only been high school students. And I always try, as things come up, to share experiences that weren't always positive for me, things that had a negative impact on me, so I can tell them how I tried to work through it and to try and warn them about those kinds of challenges. But one of the things that I really try to integrate into my classroom experiences is ownership of the material and ownership of the schedule that we're on, that they have to own that schedule, that they have to be responsible for not just keeping up, which is critical. That's something I push all the time is, even if you're struggling with the material, don't fall behind. Because from my own experience as an undergraduate, falling behind never worked out. It always hurt me. And so I always remind them, even if you're struggling with the information, continue to keep up with this. We can go back and review old information if that's necessary. But also to encourage them to interact in a more direct way with me as a teacher than I think a lot of them are used to. I think for a lot of them, in their high school experience, a teacher is almost like a video that they watch that tells them information, and they may receive it or not, but they're not placed in a situation where they need to interact directly with them, and especially with the exam situation that I mentioned, which is that I encourage them when they miss points on exams, and I try and write my exams in such a way that I have some flexibility with regards to the number of points that they may receive. And if they feel like they got partial credit and deserved a little more partial credit, then they're encouraged to come to me and not just tell me that they deserve more because they think that the question was not correctly written, but to actually go back and review notes and material that they have and then come to me and say, these are the reasons based on the information that you gave me why I made that decision to answer the question that way. And it forces them to take to take a strong stand on their position and their opinion. And again, I've noticed that when I first started doing it early in the year, especially with my biotechnology and chemical technician courses, they were hesitant to have those conversations. But as the years progressed, they've gotten a lot more confident in coming to me and saying, these were the notes I took the day we were talking about this particular subject. And you can see if the notes are correct, that actually my line of reasoning wasn't as far off as it may appear, and give me some reasons for, in fact, this just happened on a test when we were talking about why a recrystallization process may fail. And there are a list of reasons why, and they have to do with the different kind of solvents and polarities and stuff. But one of my students came to me and she said that she actually found a section in some of the reading that I'd given her where they talked about melting points and boiling points, and it was indirectly related to the reasons, but I thought her reasoning was valid, and so we gave her some more points. And so those kinds of things give the students, I think, an opportunity to take ownership of the material, to take ownership of their experience, and be able to go to their professor and realize that it's not an adversarial exchange, it's part of the learning experience, that they should be able to come to them and say, these are my reasons for why I believe, that I got at least deserve more partial credit, and they've grown through that experience.
How do you like help those students that it's really, really, really out of their comfort zone to come to you, to feel comfortable that they can approach you?
I write down notes as I'm grading exams on specific questions where I feel like that particular interaction may be appropriate. And then if the student doesn't come to me, I give them the opportunity to do that. I'll give them a little bit of time, and then I'll go back to my notes, and I'll maybe pull the student aside and say, hey, I kind of noticed on question number 4 that you answered the question in a way, I saw some value to your question. I didn't give you as many points as I thought maybe I could have. Maybe we should talk about that more. And if you would take and remind them of the process of saying, go back to your notes, go back to the material that you've got, reread the question on the exam, and come and let's talk about it. And at first, that seemed to help some of the ones that were a little bit hesitant. At this point, though, after we've been at it for a semester and a little more, none of them have any. In fact, a couple of them could take a step back on occasion because they're very assertive. I like that. I like that they're assertive, and I like that they take that strong position. But to me, being able to reevaluate their performance on a specific question in the context of the material, and form an even stronger opinion, and come to me with and be assertive and say, I really feel like this is valid, and let me explain to you why. To me, that is an important part of them in an overall way owning their experience, right? That this is like, this is something that you need to be able to not just negotiate and manage and navigate as a college student, but through your life, right? I mean, you need to be able to have the confidence to say, I feel like this is correct, and understand that this isn't some adversarial position where you and I are at odds with each other, but it's part of the process. In my mind, it's an important part of the process because, as I mentioned to you a minute ago, I remember specific times when I went to professors and didn't get points, but walked away from the experience better for it. Even though I might not have agreed at all with what happened, I still feel like that process of asserting myself and forcing me to go back and reevaluate the material, I understood it better. So I think a lot of it is, and to me, like I said, a lot of them as high school students have never been put in a position where they were asked to do that, so they don't have the practice or the confidence to do it. So one of the things I started to do early on in all of my classes, this room and this facility lends itself very well to a hands-on experience, which I think is so important. In chemical technician, in biotechnology, and in forensic science, it's so important to be able to give them the opportunity to actually put their hands on things and actually move beyond just receiving information by way of a lecture or reading it out of a book. And what I learned early on, and I actually learned this when I was teaching freshman chemistry at the University of Utah as a grad student, is that they need to have the opportunity to take the information that they learned in class and put it into practice. And sometimes that's more challenging than people realize, especially, for example, in chemistry. And I'll give you a specific example. So I had a student once when I was a freshman, or a grad student, as a freshman chemist, walked up to me, and he had an Erlenmeyer flask in his hand with a clear liquid in it. And he said, does this look right? And I said, what is it? And he said, this is step 4. And I said, no, that's not step 4. That is, you just neutralize the pH by adding an acid or whatever. That's what's happening. Step 4 doesn't mean anything to me or you or anyone else, right? And the point is, it's like, if they don't understand at each point in the process what's happening, the whole purpose of the hands-on experience is lost, I think. And that's very common. And it was very common for my first few months of chemtech and biotech and forensic science. They would show me stuff and they would say, I would say, what is this, or whatever, and they would say, well, I'm at this point in the lab, and they'd hold up the lab, and I'd say, that's great, but like what's happening here, And as I started to challenge them more and more in that way, like I said, now my biotech and chemtech students who have been in this now for a while, and now this new group of concurrent enrollment forensic science students are going through this process of realizing that it isn't enough to read a lab and understand the sequential set of activities that basically result in doing a recipe in a kitchen. That's not good enough. You have to be able to answer at each stage what's happening here and why am I doing step 4? What's the purpose of step 4? And so I when they come to me with, well, I just did this and so now what do I do? Or a question like, I just did this and does this look right? My answer to them is, what do you think it is? Does it look right? Like, knowing what you know about what you just did, does this make sense? Does it look right? And what I've noticed is every chance I get to use the hands-on process as some way to illustrate what we learned, they always, at first they were slow to do it, and it takes a little more effort on their part. That's part of the ownership part of it. But once they start realizing that's what's expected, then they start doing it. And what I noticed is after they start that process, then they start solving problems that may come up that we didn't plan for or intend by using what they know before and applying it to the new problem. I'm starting to see patterns where it turns out that the students aren't ready and they feel like they are. And I think that the reason for that is because while the skills that they had in their high school experience served them, they're not serving them in the college experience. I had to experience the sting of not being prepared and feeling like I was. That was hard. And I can see why students would be so dejected by that experience that they may even want to drop out, and that's terrible. It shouldn't be an experience that takes somebody to that level. There are fixes to it. But I think a lot of people internalize it and realize, or think to themselves incorrectly, that I'm not cut out for college. That's not true at all. But if you're helping them accurately self-assess and then giving the tools they need to deal with different subject matter, anyone can work through that problem. So I don't like the idea of, I don't like the fact that the freshman dropout rate in college is high in this country. I don't like that. And so I think that there are things that can be done to address it. Those kids are there. They're there because they want to take advantage of this amazing opportunity, and that any encouragement that you can give them, especially if they undergo setbacks, which is I think typical as they make that transition into college. It's important to continue to encourage them to not let those setbacks become something that they define themselves by. It's okay, and that's why, like I said, I always share stories of things that happened to me where I felt like I was going to quit grad school, for example, because I flunked this exam and walked around the block of my apartment for like 3 hours deciding if I needed to quit or not, and I'm glad I didn't. But I always remind them, it's like, you know what, that's okay. Those kind of setbacks are going to happen. But I constantly try to remind myself that those students are taking the concurrent enrollment class because they're motivated and they want to be there. They recognize the need for it. And so I think not letting them feel overly discouraged or continuing to encourage them to experience setbacks, but let's get you past it. I think that's a skill set for life, but it's definitely something you need for college. If you can experience some setbacks and get back on the horse, college is going to really have its way with you, unfortunately. That was my experience. So I just started to form this opinion, actually, that the reason why, and I just heard this, I think the woman, the name of the book, I saw her interviewed on TV, I think it's iGen, and she was talking about the unique aspects of some of the kids in this generation. Now, in this generation, I don't mean millennials. I think technically these kids are a little younger than that, right? But the idea is that one of the defining aspects of kids this age is that they're risk averse. They don't like risk, and I think part of the reason for that is because in the absence of experiencing risk through their lives, because of what you just said, they've basically had the path cleared before them. They feel like risk is this like catastrophic thing, like failure is catastrophic, and so when they experience it, they feel this sense of catastrophe. When in reality, it's like, no, that's just a setback that you need to learn from and move on from with confidence. And some of them don't have that ability because throughout their lives they haven't assumed a lot of risk, they haven't experienced serious failures or setbacks, and so they're inexperienced. And in their minds, it's like I said, it's the end of the world if I have this setback. No, it's really not. It's not. It's something that you need to learn from, and it should hurt a little bit. That's part of it because you don't want to continue to experience those things. But that pain can be something, and I've watched this now with some students. One in particular, who has legitimate learning challenges. She has some. I don't know that I'm qualified to say it's a learning disability, but she has some real challenges, and rather than let those things give her the excuse to drop out of my class when she did miserably at the beginning, she went home and told herself, no, I'm going to do this. And when she came and talked to me and said, I'm not going to quit, even though, in fact, her dad even told her, when he saw her grade at the term, he said, well, what class do you want to switch into? And her response was, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to quit. And so when she came to me and told me that story, I said, you know what? I'm going to make sure that I'm here for you every chance you need and give you the support you need, a little extra help in any way that I can. And she actually took that setback and turned it into, and her grade, she went from almost failing the class to a B in the course of that next term. But it was because she took ownership of the problem and somehow realized that setback wasn't going to define her, but instead she was going to use it to catapult her to bigger successes. But in the end, it was because she owned it. She said, I'm going to take this, I'm not going to quit, I'm going to do it. And then when she came to me with that attitude, we started to work together to give her some new strategies on how to study specific parts of the biotechnology class that she was struggling with. And like I said, she pulled her grade up to a B. SLCC's initial meeting where that research was discussed made me more aware and reminded me of my own challenges in transitioning into being a college student. And I think that made me a little more aware and maybe a little more sensitive to their challenges. And I like to think it made me a little more patient with them than I maybe would have been had I not had that meeting at SLCC, because I think I may have been impatient and just frustrated with them when they had setbacks and wanted to quit. And now I realize that, oh, that's right, I remember transitioning and being a college student was hard. And I think it's helped me to be a little bit more patient as a teacher too. So patience and encouragement, just positive encouragement. It sounds hokey and, it does. It sounds like something that you'd read in some, like self-help book or something. But it really works. It really works. But in this context, they're experiencing real growing pains as they make that transition, and they need that kind of support more than they probably did in a regular high school class.